Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Against All Odds. My name is Darrell Coker, your regular host. And for those of you who are watching for the first time, this is a podcast that I started a few months ago to empower people from the BAME demographic with stories about people who have succeeded against all odds. And that's the name of our podcast. So tonight we're privileged to have as a guest my nephew, and he's not allowed to call me uncle.
No, I'll try.
My nephew Darrell Coker. Darrell is a co-founder of a company called Flair. I'll let him tell us a bit about that in due course. And he's actually my brother's youngest son. So we share the same surname, obviously, Coker, and he also had a first class degree in management from Warwick, as did I. Also had a first class degree. And Darrell co-founded the company with another nephew of mine called Nee Cleland. Nee is the son of my sister AC Cleland, Frankie and AC Cleland. And he has a very interesting story, and I'm sure that by the time we're through with this, there'll be many lessons that you learn from our conversation. So Darrell, you're welcome. Welcome to Against All Odds.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good. So in 2017, you co-founded Flair as a football-focused technology business with Nee, obviously Nee Cleland. Tell us about that experience and how you grew that business to become one of the top 10 UK apps for young footballers. What was the thinking behind the setup of Flair Football?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it was a really interesting journey. I graduated from Warwick in 2016. I had a couple of job offers, one at Amazon, one at Accenture. I was going to go with Accenture, so I chose them, and then they kept pushing back the start date month after month. And I was basically just trying to figure out, what do I do with myself? So do I go traveling? Do I get an internship? And around that time, Nee had just quit the investment banking world. So we just decided very, very randomly, let's team up together for a few months and start a business. And the way we kind of looked at it is we thought about what are the kind of core areas that we're interested in. Football was something that we both really cared about. I'm a massive Liverpool fan. He's a big Man U fan.
Right. That was something interesting.
It was always contentious. And we basically just felt that when we were playing football as kids, there was never really a platform for us to properly kind of share our experiences and really kind of feel like a professional on the pitch. And we thought, okay, why not try and build a business around that passion that a lot of kids in the UK have. So what we basically built was a football app that gave kids the opportunity to basically feel like a pro. So they could set up their own profiles, share their stats, videos, connect with their teammates. They can kind of check out which opposition they're playing over the weekend and see who their best players are and what their videos are like. And it started off just as an idea, and then over the course of the kind of weeks and months after that, we kind of got a bit carried away with it, and we started thinking, how do we actually build this? We basically spoke to an organisation called Mallow Street, who have basically built their own social network within a different sector.
Was that David?
Yeah, so
David,
yeah, so
David is somebody we interviewed on a previous episode.
Exactly, yeah. And we basically just asked for advice. How do you build a social network? And they essentially said that, you know what you're saying sounds really interesting. We can actually help to kind of initially fund this idea. So they gave us a small amount of investment, and we used that to basically build out a very small development team to start building the app. And then, over the course of the next 3 years, we went from an idea on a piece of paper to an app that was being used by about 20 to 30,000 kids across the UK. We got to number 10 in the App Store for the sports sector, which was really, really a big moment. And we grew the team to a team of 6. We raised a couple rounds of investment. So things really kind of spiraled from that initial idea.
So it actually became a proper business.
Yeah.
Okay, that's quite interesting. And like I said, you took an idea, what was basically a passion or just an idea, and structured, something viable around the idea. How would you say, there's lots of people watching this whose children are crazy about football. You know, lots of parents who ferry their kids for football practice, football training, and many of them have the mindset that maybe one day they might break into the top league, you know, and get wealthy and everything that comes with it. You know, however, the reality is that very few, I mean, majority of those kids, you know, might never graduate through the ranks. You know, and some of them get disillusioned, especially when they've focused on football at the expense of their studies and all that. What was the thinking behind your business proposition for Flair Football in terms of giving kids exposure to possibly maybe football scouts and stuff like that? Was there any such plan built into your business model?
Yeah, so initially we actually called, this is going way back, so probably only a few listeners will remember this, but initially we called the business Spotters, and the idea was that it was around talent spotting, helping young talented football players to be identified by scouts, by professional clubs. And then the more we kind of built the business, the more we tried to veer away from that angle, because exactly what you just said, the vast majority of kids who love football just won't become a professional football player. And we actually wanted to kind of flip the narrative to say that you don't need to be a professional, you can feel like a professional as a 12-year-old kid who loves the game, who cares more about their Sunday league trophy than anything else in the world, and we want to give you that feeling. And even if you don't become a professional, you should be able to really celebrate that and
that experience,
and feel that kind of buzz that you get from actually making it in the game. So we had a few professional clubs who were quite interested in the data set we were building, the kind of network of young football players. But yeah, we never kind of really went too deep in that angle for that reason.
Okay. So then COVID hit.
Yeah, it did.
My goodness, that was a blow.
Yeah.
Tell, what did you do?
Just panicked, sweated. I mean, yeah, just a bit of context. Obviously, COVID was a really kind of incredible time for a lot of people, a lot of organisations. For us, we relied on people being outdoors playing sport for the app to work, and literally overnight we went from, midway through an investment round, we're growing really fast, literally overnight, nothing, because people couldn't play football, therefore they couldn't use the product. So initially it was kind of just like, what on earth's going on? What do we do? We spent a few days kind of just trying to understand a bit more about COVID, because the first few days no one really knew what was going on. Then we basically realized that we were going to run out of cash if we didn't do something quickly. We actually decided to raise a GoFundMe. So we did a campaign. We were literally messaging every single person I know from school, from uni, family, friends, basically saying to them, our business is in a really tricky position. We need a bit more time to figure out what comes next for Flair. And we basically raised about £26,000 in the space of a month from just our network. And that gave us enough money to then have enough time to pivot the business and launch what we have now. Without that, we probably wouldn't have stayed in business, and I'd probably be doing something else than what I'm doing now. So yeah, it was just a situation of trying to think logically and decide what we needed to do. What we then kind of realized when we raised that initial money was, we need to change business. We can't stay in the sports sector. It's too volatile. We don't know when football's going to be played again. And we started to really think, what other missions could we go after in the world? What else matters to us? And around that time, George Floyd was murdered. And we saw a lot of organisations coming out with statements, action plans, black squares, posts on LinkedIn, and we felt, okay, there's action around racial equity, but we weren't really sure whether it was actually being guided by any data. And I actually wrote a post on Medium at the time, basically saying that we need to treat racial equity in a similar way that you treat product development, in that you need to start with doing proper research, proper data analysis, understanding what the problems are before rushing and starting all these solutions and training and initiatives. And off the back of that, we then decided, right, let's try and build a business around helping organizations to gather data on how racially equitable their cultures are and using that data to basically inform their strategies for making more racially equitable cultures. So we did a complete 180 in the space of 3 weeks, shut down the football app, and started Flair as it is now, which I'm sure I'll talk about as we go along.
Yeah. So you've got a management background.
Yeah.
But the very essence of building a business requires you to get involved in so many different parts. You've got to deal with investors, you've got to deal with strategy, you've got to deal with technical people who are building platforms, you've got to deal with marketing, you've got an idea, who do you talk to, and even once you figured out that, okay, maybe let's repurpose our platform or our tech company to service the racial inequity space as aware. It sounds like you had to wear many hats, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
You're currently head of product at Flair, but I'm sure there were many hats you had to wear in this process. Just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, it doesn't stop. It feels like now I've still got like 10 different heads wearing different hats, but I guess throughout the time at Flair, I've done a range of different things. So head of product, so thinking about the roadmap of what we're building, working a lot with development teams. Again, I'm not a technical person, so I've never coded ever. So trying to become more familiar with that world so you can actually have conversations with people from a more technical background.
Yeah.
Marketing, sales. Like right now in Flair, I do a lot of direct selling for the product that we have. A lot of people management as well. So the bigger the team gets, you need people who are essentially getting coached and guided and giving feedback. And a lot of my time spent doing that as well. Then there's the investor side, so building relationships with investors, managing expectations, pitching for funding. Yeah, there's a lot of different hats. But I guess that's probably one of my strengths is that I feel like I'm quite an adaptable person. So I very much focus on what is the goal and where do I need to kind of focus my efforts in order to achieve that goal. And if that means that I need to wear 2-3 hats at any given time, then that's something I'll do. I guess the bigger the company gets, the more you need to bring in people who can actually own certain functions of the business and play more of a, I guess, managerial role. But yeah, inevitably there's always something that I need to be heavily involved in, so it's hard to kind of fully take that step back.
Yeah. The reason I asked that on purpose is the attribute of adaptability. Because a lot of people watching this might be pigeonholed in their thinking that they're only good at this or they're only good at that. But for you to make progress in any field of endeavor, obviously your line of endeavor is entrepreneurship. You've got to be adaptable. You've got to learn how to talk to people. You've got to learn. One of the things I'm amazed about is when people struggle to approach strangers and pitch ideas. And you've got to be able to do that. Because if you're not adaptable and somebody's like, I'm not sure what's going to happen. You've got to overcome that fear of rejection. Just tell us a bit about maybe some instances where, in the early days, where before you got your first clients, what did you go through? You had this concept, you sat down with me, you thought through it, came up with what you wanted to do, you put something together, then what? Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so we decided to go for the education market to start with. So we basically realised that a lot of schools were having open letters sent from their alumni, basically ex-students saying, when I was at school, I faced these racial inequities and I wanted the school to do something about it. So that's why we decided, right, this is a market that we really need to approach right now. And also the fact that education when it comes to racial equity starts when you're a kid. So we think it's really important to kind of focus on that area. And then we had a lot of schools who were really on board, but we had a lot of schools who we'd hear things like, we don't have a problem, or there's no kind of racial inequities, which for us didn't really marry up with some of the experiences that we had and some of the experiences that previous students had as well. So one of the kind of core challenges was dealing with hearing that directly when we felt so strongly that wasn't the approach you need to take. And sometimes you're in a conversation where someone just can't be convinced and you just need to accept that they're not the right person.
Right.
So in those kind of situations, it's all about knowing who are your kind of initial customers, where do you focus in terms of the ideal customer type, and knowing when to stop a conversation saying, right, we're not on the same page here and that's okay, and we'll just have to end the conversation there and stop trying. So yeah, that was one of the core challenges. Building the actual product was another core challenge because we had barely any time to do it. My kind of view is, from a product perspective, is trying to start small with a minimum viable product. So if you've got an idea, you might think, right, okay, I'm gonna spend loads of money, loads of time building this really fully fledged thing, but it's better off doing kind of the minimum you need to do in order to get something out there, start getting feedback, start learning directly from clients what's useful, what's not useful. So that was the approach we had to take there, was basically just to put together a very quick product so that we can launch it to schools. And for that, we just had to do a lot of thinking around how do we do that, which again was quite challenging. So yeah.
And then how did you progress from there to sort of servicing the Premier League, and now you service a whole range of, you've got quite a few clients all over the world. I mean, how did you make that transition? What was it, through a network that you had built, or was it just cold calling? I'm asking this question on purpose because I'm trying to get our viewers to understand what it takes, to go looking for clients. I mean, for instance, I started this podcast a couple of months ago. Initially, I approached people that I went to school with, people that I went in my network, but then very quickly I realized that pool was going to dry up. So I had to approach people, in the wider world. And it's difficult approaching someone you've never spoken before, and a lot of the people that we interview as well, like yourselves, are extremely busy people, very successful people who receive hundreds of requests literally every day. And there are some people who just say we're swamped, don't have time for this, and your request for like an interview, whatever it is, just falls amidst a pile of other requests. But somehow you've got to overcome that challenge and go out there and find somebody your ideal. Talk about ideal customer. Finding who your ideal customer is. Make a pitch to them. And the interesting things are, more often than not, you get a yes, but you've got to overcome that negativity within yourself. Think that, nobody's going to want my service, nobody's going to want to pay for the service. So just tell us a bit about how you made that transition from schools to like the Premier League and some of the professional service organizations that you now service.
Good question. So first thing was that we noticed a lot of the schools we worked with, the parents had started to email us saying, this is really interesting, can you bring this to my company? So that helped us to understand who are the types of organizations we should be targeting. And then you're completely right, we had to break that barrier of, we don't know anyone in these organizations, how on earth do we sign up to the Premier League or EY or whichever organization it might be? Oftentimes it was a case of just building out a list of people we wanted to reach and reaching out to them and cold calling and cold emails and trying to get introductions from people who then eventually became existing clients. So it's been a lot of hard work to just get in front of the right people. But over time, the more the business has grown, the easier it's become in terms of the brand we're building, the easier it's become to get introductions to the right people. But at the start, it's very much, you're starting from zero. You need to just be bold and not be afraid for people to ignore you or say no to you. My general view is that if you're trying to build a product, the only way to succeed is to prove you can actually reach your customers in the first place. So you need to just put yourself out there and try.
So the Flair brand, what was the thinking behind the Flair brand, and what does the Flair brand stand for?
Yeah, so this one's interesting because just a bit of context. So the name Flair, it was kind of a spillover of the previous business, Flair Football.
Okay.
When we built the football app, it was all about allowing kids a platform to share their gifts, their videos, and that was all about self-expression. Okay. And the word Flair was kind of synonymous with that, so that's why we chose the name Flair.
Right. Okay.
And the brand was kind of all centered around that self-expression type of angle. Okay. The reason why for Flair as it is now we didn't change the name is because we still believe that racial equity should be about self-expression. Mm-hmm. So if you're really in a truly equitable world, people should be able to be themselves in the workplace, in schools, in hospitals, whichever sector they're in. So we kept that name, and branding wise we've just kind of built everything around the idea of allowing people to be themselves. So yeah, in terms of like the colours we have were quite distinct, I'd say, from a typical, let's say, survey company that might be quite dull in terms of the look and feel. We try to be unique in that sense. Okay. So yeah, that's kind of the ethos of who we are, is we are ourselves. We are kind of trying to be unique within the market.
So I also know that Flair as a business is 100% remote working.
Yeah.
You know, so how do you build a global business? Because now you've gone global. You're not just a tiny thing in a corner shop somewhere. You know, you've expanded the US as well. How do you grow and build a brand and a company and establish a culture where there's no or very little social interaction? I mean, how do you overcome that problem?
Yeah, you've got to be really intentional about it. So for us, we know that that's a potential problem, and therefore we go over and above to make sure that we try and build that culture as much as possible. Obviously there are certain downsides that you can't get over in terms of when you're in person with people, the bonds that you build, the relationships you can kind of develop over time. It's quite a unique experience. But that said, we do things like regular socials. We bring people together from different parts of, let's say, the UK. We do a lot of virtual events as well, so trying to give people a platform to talk, to have fun, to socialise. And we're also just intentional about making sure the team knows what the values of the company are. So very clearly stating, these are the different values we have, this is what our mission is. And Nia and I are always trying to continually kind of communicate that along with the rest of the team, just to make clear what we stand for. So I think with those things combined, I believe we've managed to build a culture that is defined. I guess the challenge is the bigger you get, the harder it gets, because we're a team of about 15 now, and after a team of 100 it's a lot harder. We're going to need to keep evolving our strategies for how to make that work in a bigger team. And I almost feel like in a startup, every few years, every few months, it's almost like a new company. So when you're a team of 2 versus a team of 6 versus a team of 20, you almost need to
reinvent yourself
but pick out the good bits at the same time. So we're not complacent in knowing that it's going to be a challenge, but when we get to that point, we'll be very intentional about how we're going to get over that challenge.
You also happen to have been nominated for the Forbes 30 under 30. I mean, Nia and yourself, which is no mean feat, right? How did that feel, and what did that do to the validation of your business model?
Yeah, it's I think in general, like my personality, I'm very driven. So it means that oftentimes I don't really pause enough to reflect on everything that's been achieved. So if you were to speak to my friends or my family or whoever it might be and ask, like, am I like happy or satisfied with where we are? The answer is probably no, because I'm always trying to achieve something more. But moments like the Forbes nomination, where you could pause for a second and say, right, okay, we've done all right, we're going in a good direction, and obviously it feels good. But in the back of my mind, and 10 seconds later, I'm thinking, okay, like, why are we growing faster? Why haven't we made more impact? Why haven't we done X, Y, Z? So that's always my mindset. I don't pay a huge amount of attention to those kind of accolades. I almost feel like it's a blessing and a curse, because I think I almost need that in order to drive the business to the next stage. But equally, you don't want to just be constantly not satisfied. So it's a tough balance. And yeah, in terms of the actual business, it has helped. So when you're on a call, when you're doing an event or a webinar, and people see that, I think it does help to bring that validation of what you're doing. But yeah, in my mind, I've almost forgotten about it. Forgotten about it within a month, and I go places sometimes. I meet with friends, I go to a party, so I was like, oh yeah, didn't you do this? And I was like, literally completely escapes my mind because it's in the past, it's done. I'm near the end of my 20s now,
what's the next thing?
I won't even be able to think about being under 30 anymore. So yeah, it's not that big a thing in my mind.
Right. So you grew up with a family. I mean, our family is basically academics. We've got doctors, ATS is a computer person and all that. Where did this entrepreneurial bug come from?
Yeah, good question. I think, I mean, I'm trying to just like think back to when I was growing up. I feel like my parents did lots of different entrepreneurial things back in the day. I don't know a huge amount about them because I was quite young, but my dad did a few things with fish tanks and stuff like that that I don't know a huge amount about, but maybe there were elements there where I thought, okay, they're doing things that are entrepreneurial, therefore I'm more likely to do that. But generally speaking, I think I was probably surrounded by a family where they were going down a more traditional path in terms of career. My dad being a doctor. And for me, I don't know what it is, but I've just always wanted to be in business. Maybe it comes from watching Dragon's Den and The Apprentice growing up. Maybe it comes from, I don't know, doing young enterprise at school and like really enjoying pitching and things like that. I've always wanted to be in business and run my own business at some point. And even when I was at school, I don't know how much my mum knows about this, but I used to like sell my cheese sandwiches in the playground and things like that. Like, always kind of had that bug. I don't know where it's come from, but yeah, I don't know what else I'd do if I wasn't running a business. Because something in me just wants to be building something, having a really difficult challenge, having to start something from scratch. And at some point, you can't just keep doing that forever, but I feel like I want to do that forever, so.
So now, just tell us a bit more about what Flair does. I mean, for people who are watching this who understand the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation, which is kind of why we're even doing this podcast. This podcast is basically to ensure that we bring people on who have succeeded against all odds, in spite of all the challenges that we have as a people, not being, white or whatever it is. What exactly will somebody watching this podcast, who might be a senior executive somewhere in a company, a decision maker, what can they get by engaging Flair, in their ESG planning and ESG initiatives?
Yeah, so Flair is a racial equity technology company. I'd say the simplest way to look at why we exist is that you can't solve a problem that you don't understand. I know that a lot of organizations, they have challenges around racial equity. We can see that in the numbers of people from ethnically minoritized backgrounds who are in senior leadership positions in different sectors. It's clear that there are some barriers that are kind of contributing to some of those issues. So you really need to go deep in understanding what those barriers are. And for me, you need to start with your people. You need to understand how your people are feeling, what are the behaviors in your culture, how aware are people of how to deal with different issues. If they witnessed a microaggression or a racist joke, do they know what to do? Do they respond in the right way? All these bits of data are crucial in order to know what do we need to do in order to address any issues and actually achieve change. And my view is that I run like a 15-person company, and it's hard enough for me to have a sense of what's going on, how people feeling, let alone if you're running a 1,000-person organization. So you need to start with data. You need to gather data from your people. And we do that through a questionnaire that goes out to all members of the organization, measuring things like behaviors being experienced, inclusion barriers, diversity levels, awareness levels, and how to respond to racist behavior. We get that data, we put it in a platform, and we basically identify key areas for an organization to focus on in order to improve. and we then give an action plan off the back of that that says, these are your core improvement areas, here's what you need to do to actually implement change. So what I'd say to a senior executive is that I believe we've built a really robust and effective way of gathering the right data, and it's very hard to do that internally, especially when people are scared of speaking up to their employer. So we do a really, really good job of getting people to open up, gathering the data in an effective way, analysing it in a way that saves you loads of time, and ultimately giving you solutions that mean your culture is going to get better, retention will improve, engagement will improve, and also your business will succeed more from working with us.
Okay. Would you say that the diversity, equity, and inclusion drive has decreased post George Floyd? I mean, obviously at the time there was COVID, everybody was sitting at home, people had a bit more time on their hands, it was a topical issue. There have been loads more instances of racial inequity since then. But then now we've got Ukraine, you've got cost of living crisis, you've got interest rates, went up again today and all that. Would you say that the appetite for diversity is still as strong as it was a few years ago?
I think there was a spike, and I think naturally after that spike there was a fall, but I think overall, if I was to look at let's say 2019 compared to now, so before George Floyd's murder compared to now, I think the investment in the space is higher than it was.
Okay.
So overall I think it's improved, but it's definitely had a fall off from the very, very height of the kind of resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, which isn't too surprising because at the time, obviously we had COVID. It's natural that things are cyclical in terms of the media cycle, sadly, and as more things happen in the world, things kind of go in peaks and troughs, but then the overall trend is that it's still a top priority. It still needs to be a top priority because ultimately, if you don't get your culture right, you're not going to succeed in the 21st century. And I think as the years go by, it's going to overall become a more and more important part of every organisation. And in order to succeed, you need to really take it seriously. Otherwise, your competition's going to eat you alive. That's my view.
So, Darrell, what would you say to someone who knows, right? And again, when it comes to racial inequity, it's very subtle. Okay, somebody who's not in our shoes might not understand this conversation, might not understand why we think that our lack of progression or our lack of being considered for things is simply because of the color of our skin. And it's kind of swept under the carpet, and people are very clever and kind of, they've created a whole shroud of mystery around this racial inequity thing, but we know it's there. I mean, we can see it, we experience it, but you're not quite sure who to talk to, what to do about it. What would you do? I mean, what advice would you give to somebody who's going through such an experience?
It's tough. It depends on what type of organisation you're working in. So there are some occasions where you can try and speak to, whether it's a senior leader or someone within your team who you can kind of talk through the issues you're facing and talk through the fact that you want more to be done or you want certain issues to be resolved. And in an environment where you've got people who listen, then that can work sometimes. So that would be my first piece of advice is try and have that conversation, see if people are receptive. Then there are times where organisations have that conversation, they're not receptive, and at some point you need to decide, is this the right type of organisation that I want to be in? And are you willing to experience some of these challenges for a long duration of time? Because at the end of the day, people spend most of their time in life at work, and you don't want to be in a place where you don't feel you're progressing at the rate you should do based on your race or ethnicity. So for me, it's start having the conversation, and if the company is not really listening enough, knowing when to decide it's not the right place to be and making that decision, because I think ultimately that is something that gets organisations to listen. It's seeing people decide to leave.
Okay.
Sometimes that can be a real catalyst for actual change. So yeah, that would be the advice that I'd give.
And I've also had experiences in the past where you hire people who are from the BAME demographic, but then they have this attitude of entitlement. They think that because they're dealing with another black person, they don't work as hard, they're not as driven, they don't apply themselves. Would you say that sometimes people of color are victims of our own, we sort of we create the problem for ourselves because we have a certain perception. If you talk about people, another reason why we have this podcast is that we're trying to showcase that you don't have to just be successful as a black person in music. We have the Stormzy's or in sports, boxing, Anthony Joshua, and maybe football. That's kind of where people are okay when they see black people who've done well. But the purpose of this podcast is to showcase people who have achieved success along other routes. But like I said, sometimes we don't do ourselves a favor because we're seen as not focused. We don't apply ourselves. We don't speak up. We have a cultural, almost cultural, sort of, I'm not quite sure how to describe it, but a cultural reluctance, to be seen to be someone who speaks up, someone who will ask for more work, ask for more opportunities. It's like the thing to do is if you have a job, you go to a job, you do what you're expected to do, you go home, and that's it. But people like that don't progress. And sometimes I wonder if people were to overcome that perception of being black and unprogressive, would help us as a people, to go far. What do you think about that?
It's tricky. It's and the first thing I'd say is I can understand sometimes people are tired because oftentimes you might have a situation like that where someone has tried, has had the conversations and not really seen that progress, and it's a tricky balance between continuing to have the conversation and just feeling drained and exhausted. I'd rather try and flip it on its head in terms of the entire society that we live in, trying to build more equitable systems and practices and processes whereby people don't feel exhausted by all the barriers in place. Obviously there comes a point where we need to think, okay, what can we actually do ourselves to make change? And I think I always try and push boundaries and try and advocate for change. But equally, there are times in my life where I have just been very similar in terms of, okay, here's a situation, but I'm not necessarily going to have the conversation because maybe I'm tired, or maybe, I've only got a few more months in this scenario and I don't feel I need to, kind of put myself in that position. So I get it. And I think it's not the fault of people in that position, but equally I think if we need to see real change, it's going to be a mix. It's going to be people from ethnically minoritized backgrounds plus people who aren't coming together to kind of drive things forward. But I think we need to make sure the burden isn't on people who are facing those challenges, and there's a collective effort.
Okay. So what motivates you, if I may ask?
So many things. I'm just really competitive in general. I've always done sport growing up, did athletics, football, rugby. I just like being better every day, competing against myself. So again, I can be quite critical of myself for that reason, where I'm thinking, okay, I want to achieve amazing things, and I just get a buzz from doing well in itself without any other added kind of benefits. So that's one big kind of driver of my work. Want to make my family proud, want to, reach the latter stages of my career and have my parents and my partner and my friends look back and say, wow, you've done really, really good in the world, you've made a real impact. And I watched this video years and years ago. I think it was Mark Zuckerberg who was giving a speech at Harvard or something along those lines, and saying that the people there were obviously very privileged to be in that position. And if you're in that position, you almost have more of a responsibility to make sure that you give to the world, that you achieve amazing things, that you essentially change the world. So my view is that the more successful I get, because obviously I'm only 28 and I hope to achieve a lot more, the more successful I get, the more I should be contributing. And I don't want to rest at building Flair and having a business that's 7-figure business. That's not enough. As soon as I get to that next milestone, I need to think, right, now I'm in this position, what more can I do that's going to make more of an impact, that's going to inspire more people? So that's my mindset, is always just, I need to achieve in order to kind of justify the fact that I've been lucky enough to be where I am.
Okay. Growing up, I was talking to your dad the other day when we traveled to Portugal, and he was saying that you've always been good in school. You're good in everything.
Don't know about that. I'm terrible at art and stuff.
All right. But what kind of how did you end up doing a degree in management?
Yeah, I think so. When I was at school, I basically just didn't really know what I wanted as a kind of degree. I knew I wanted to go to university, probably partly because my siblings had gone to university, all of my friends were going to university, so I thought, okay, that's something I want to do. I'd enjoy the experience, and I wanted to have a course that was quite open. Okay. So the management degree I did at Warwick, it was pretty flexible, so you could choose different modules. I did some economics, some finance, some kind of behavioural psychology modules, and it really allowed me to kind of pick and choose what I was most interested in. Okay. So that really, really appealed to me.
Right.
And also just like the name of the course, management, I knew that I wanted to manage at some point. So I thought, okay, this probably is a good fit. Okay. But yeah, to be honest, like I think I learned a lot from my degree, but I think purely just by going to uni and kind of picking up life skills, that was probably the most beneficial part of going to university, in my opinion. So the course itself, it mattered a bit, and there are tiny bits here and there that are helpful for today, but really it's more just the experience of being out there
and living
life,
the lived experience.
Just growing up and becoming an adult.
Good. Yeah. Good. What do you do to unwind?
I go for walks, so I've got like a step count on my watch. Try to do 11,000 steps a day. It's a lot easier now because it's sunny and it's bright really late, so that's kind of where I just disappear from the world, listen to a podcast, listen to music, just chill out, watching trash on Netflix, like shows, reality TV shows, that kind of thing. Spending time with my girlfriend, my friends, my family, nothing special, just trying to make sure that every day I have a bit of time for myself.
You seem to be quite well traveled as well. I had a quick look at your LinkedIn profile. I was just trying to get some material for this interview, and you seem to have been all over the world.
I've got a lot more places I want to go, but I think in the last few years, especially like post-pandemic, I've started to go to a few more places. Like Needs me down to New York now, so I went there recently. Where else? Went skiing quite recently as well. So just trying to explore more of the world. Right. That's definitely a thing I want to do more. Yeah.
But you didn't pick up the photography.
I feel like I could take a picture, but like when my dad's taking a picture, he's like, okay, you should take it. The family usually gives it to me, so I think that's a good sign. But I haven't properly got into like photography like he is. Right. Maybe when I'm 50 or something, I'll start. But not for now. Not for now.
Okay. Just as we wrap up this conversation, what do you think about this podcast and what we're trying to do? I know you've watched a few episodes, and what are your thoughts about what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I think people need to see others doing incredible things, and especially others who look like them, who have a similar background. The fact that you're getting the voices of so many different types of guests who have had so much kind of variety in their experiences, I think is really important, because there's going to be something for everyone. There's going to be someone who listens to this and thinks, wow, that really aligns with my experience or my mindset. That's a really helpful podcast that I can take something from. But for someone else who listens to it, think that's completely irrelevant for me, but then there'll be another episode that's relevant for them. So I think that is really very much needed, especially when I was growing up. I didn't see that many, for example, black entrepreneurs who were kind of building businesses to the scale that I want to build. And hopefully, if I was a 15-year-old watching this now, I might see myself and think, okay, maybe I can do that, or I can kind of learn from his journey. So I think it's a really, really important thing to be doing. I think, it's always good to see family doing different interesting things as well. So yeah, I love it.
Have you had any mentors along the way, especially in your professional, on your entrepreneurial journey?
I'd say that the irony is, it sounds silly, but I would say that the people I've listened to on podcasts almost feel like mentors. Okay. So How I Built This podcast by Guy Raz, I like listen to that like religiously. Like there've been times where like Flair's been really, really tough and it's like very, very hard, and it's quite isolating as a founder. Like it's hard to like chat to friends and be like, oh yeah, I'm experiencing this, because
they don't get it.
Yeah, most people aren't in that exact position. So I can just get my headphones on, go for a walk, and listen to another founder who's been through a really, really similar challenge. So that alone has been like mentorship for me. Some of the podcasts I listen to are more kind of technical, so I might be learning about things around product management. I generally try and like geek out when it comes to podcasts and things like that. In terms of actual people, who are my mentors? I try and just build relationships with other founders in general. So if we've got a particular challenge, I'll literally create a list of people who I'm like, okay, you've been in the same position, can I learn from you? Just cold message them on LinkedIn, email, booking like a half an hour chat. So I kind of use that as my way of learning, as opposed to having like a dedicated person who's been my mentor.
How important would you say LinkedIn is to a person's career progression or business development? And I've only recently investigated LinkedIn, and I'm finding it's incredible. That's how I meet many of my guests. You know, just gonna message them, and most of them come back, some of them don't. You know, what are your thoughts about LinkedIn?
It depends on the business sector. For us, like I can point to so many different parts of our journey that have been, without LinkedIn, we probably wouldn't have achieved what we achieved. So the crowdfund we did, where it was during the pandemic, a lot of that came from LinkedIn connections, posting on LinkedIn. The last investment round we raised, it came from a post that needed on LinkedIn and then led to a connection, and then we then raised the round. So many things have come from us building a presence over the period of years. It's always random things you don't expect, where it's like, okay, you might do one post that gets 10 likes and nothing comes of it. But there might be another post that gets a lot of traction, it leads to a really good opportunity, or you connect with someone really interesting. So for me, it's been really, really helpful for us. But equally, there are other sectors where maybe there's another platform that's more relevant. It might be TikTok, it might be Twitter. But yeah, for me, LinkedIn has been really, really helpful for the business.
Great. We have a tradition on this podcast where our guests get the opportunity to do a dedication to anyone of their choice. Who would you like to dedicate this podcast to? You gotta be careful.
Who do I know? So someone from an ethnic minority background?
No, anyone. It could be a dad. It could be anyone. It could be.
So someone to do the episode.
No, just dedicate this episode to anyone.
I'd like to say thank you.
Yeah, just say someone. Just it's an opportunity for you to say thank you to someone, anybody that you want.
Cool, got it. Yeah, okay, I'll just do my parents, easy.
Okay, so do it properly to the camera.
Yeah. Do I actually speak into it?
You can speak into the camera.
Okay, to my parents, because they've literally supported me from the get-go. I remember starting Flair, turning down the job at Accenture, and they were just like, what on earth are you doing? But to their credit, they just always backed me, loved me, given me support. So yeah, this one's for them.
Cool.
My dad.
Darrell, thank you very much for your time.
You.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed this episode with Darrell, I'd like you to do a couple of things for me. First of all, I'd like you to subscribe to the channel. We're trying to build a platform, and subscriptions go a very long way in helping us to attract even guests to come on this podcast. People look and say, how many subscribers do you have, whatever it is. So it's very important to us if you subscribe. Secondly, I'd like you to like this video. Okay, the YouTube algorithms pick up the likes, and it takes the platform even further. And then I'd also like you to leave some comments in the comment section below. Many people send me messages privately about how they're enjoying the podcast and everything, but I mean, thank you for those messages, but leave these messages in the comment section as well, so that the YouTube algorithm can pick it up. And then finally, I'd like you to share this video with someone. You never know, somebody might watch this and be inspired by Darrell's story. He's under 30. He's currently he's co-founded a company with his cousin. They've got 15 employees. They've gone international. It's no mean feat, and somebody might watch this episode and be inspired, but they don't have to give up. They don't have to feel defeated, and that they can rise against all odds. So thank you very much, and see you next week. Darrell, thank you.
Thank you.